Further debate, I recognize the member for Guelph.
Thank you, Speaker. Honored to rise on Bill 56, the government's latest omnibus red tape reduction bill. And I got to say, Speaker, I'm all for reducing red tape. I'd really appreciate it if the government would come forward with a bill to remove the thickest red tape creating a barrier to building housing in this province, and pass the bills I've put forward to legalize multiplexes and mid-rises so we can actually start building homes that people can afford in the communities they know and love. I wish the government would come forward with a red tape reduction bill that would take red tape off of people with Ontario disability supports who have so many challenges and barriers to red tape accessing the benefits they deserve. But the one thing I don't support addressing red tape on is protecting the quality of our drinking water. Reducing those protections, which is exactly what Schedule 1 of Bill 56 does, is deeply concerning. Now, I know the minister came out and preemptively said, we've learned from Walkerton. But I think the minister said that because the minister knew that he needed to do that, because one of the primary recommendations that came out of the Walkerton report, and I want to remind people tragically what happened in Walkerton 25 years ago, when over 2,000 people became seriously ill, and tragically 7 died from contaminated drinking water. There was a commission, and one of the things the inquiry said was that an essential first step in protecting drinking water is a multi-barrier approach to avoid contaminating our drinking water. And so I find it deeply concerning when the government says one of the purposes of this bill is to reduce redundancies. There are certain areas where we absolutely need to reduce redundancies. Clean drinking water is not one of them. Kind of like air traffic control. Air traffic control has multiple redundancies because nobody wants a problem to happen when they're up in the sky. Likewise, when it comes to protecting our drinking water, we need multiple redundancies to ensure that we don't contaminate that water, because lives are at risk. And one of the concerns I have with Schedule 1 of this bill is that we're transferring the non-politicized evidence and science-based decision-making that comes from the source water protection committees into the minister's office in a couple of critical areas. So one is in the area of redundancies, which is an incredibly important to have in protecting drink water, and the other is in the grandfathering in of those who already have permits. Because now, if the Source Water Protection Committee says, you know what, your activities are likely going to contaminate drinking water, and we're going to tell you can't do those activities until you prevent that from happening, that's being taken away from the evidence-based committee that makes that decision and going to others. Very unclear in the bill who those others are, given the history of this government, likely the minister, but likely some sort of politicized entity for something that is so critically important to make evidence and science-based. Secondly, I got to talk a little bit about Schedule 11. So when the government brought Bill 5 forward, which eliminated the Endangered Species Act, world-recognized Ontario Endangered Species Act, I didn't think it could get worse, Speaker. I just thought, well, they clearly don't believe in protecting species. It can't get any worse. And then we see Schedule 11, which allows the forestry industry to harm, kill, destroy habitats at species at risk, no longer restricted at all in forestry operations. Now, I'm all for a successful forestry sector, and I think one of the things that differentiates Ontario's forestry sector is how much of it is FSC certified, which helps us open markets in places like the EU that want to see sustainably forestry practices. And we're undermining that by removing species protection. I think it's dangerous. Finally, Speaker, I got to talk about speed cameras. I'm sorry. I don't understand how the Premier can get up and say that speed cameras, which save people's lives, are a cash grab. Because there is one simple way to avoid this fee: obey the law. All you have to do is obey the law and you don't pay a fine. What has happened with speed cameras? We have seen studies showing that they reduce the number of people traveling over the speed limit by as high as 88%. In my riding in Guelph, when speed cameras were introduced, 40% of people were driving over 10 kilometers over the speed limit in safety zones like around schools. That was reduced to less than 15% after the cameras were introduced. It's a financially responsible way to ensure that we have safe streets. And the bottom line is speed kills. At 30 kilometers an hour, 90% of those who are hit by a car survive. At 60 kilometers an hour, only 5% survive. Saving lives makes a difference, Speaker.
Thank you. Questions? I recognize the member from Markham Thornhill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, my colleague from the other side, from Guelph. Thank you for your presentation. I always respect your view, and when you come to the modernizing the Clean Water Act to empower the local source of protection authority to approve the routine amendment, like adding the new well. So without the compromising safety, that's what you are talking about. So these changes reduce delay, supporting housing growth, and maintain strong oversight. So, members, would you like to empowering the communities to act faster while maintaining the environmental protection? Do they believe in municipality should remain stuck in the red tape? Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
Response, the member for Guelph.
Thank you, Speaker. I appreciate the question from the member from Markham Thornhill. We had a great time at the Diwali event downstairs earlier today, and I want to thank you for being there with me to enjoy that event together. Speaker, when it comes up to speeding things up in housing construction, for example, I'm all for speeding it up. We desperately need to build more homes that people can afford in the communities they know and love. But when it comes up to speeding things up that could put our drinking water at risk, I say slow down. I say we got to get this right. Ask the people in Grassy Narrows what happens when your water's contaminated. Since 1968, the community's been dealing with mercury poisoning in their water. Ask folks in Walkerton what happens when your water becomes contaminated. We have to get this right. People's lives are on the line. So let's not mess with a system that works. We as a province learn from Walkerton. We've done a great job since then. I don't understand why the government wants to undermine those protections.
Questions? I recognize the member from Kiiwetinoong.
Miigwech, Speaker. Miigwech to the member for the talking about Bill 5, building a more competitive economy. But I want to focus on Schedule 1. It talks about Clean Water Act. When I think about clean water, I think about clean water in a sense where I come from in the riding of Kiiwetinoong. Today, as we speak, I know we have 12 long-term boil water advisories. Anything long-term is over 1 year where you have to boil water. Like example, in the community of Niskandaga, they've been on boil water advisory for more than 30 years. And this is Ontario. And there's no change within this act to improve the water. I don't know how many times I've asked the government of Ontario to, look at an investment in infrastructure on reserve because we are Ontarians.
Question?
But we are not treated as such. How can we improve, to be a more competitive economy if you do not give clean water to First Nations?
Member for Guelph.
Yeah, I appreciate the question from the member for Quinton and appreciate your advocacy for clean water. When we talk about water and speeding things up, why don't we speed up clean water on First Nations reserves? I know you've brought members from your riding. I've met some of them who are in their 20s and have never lived a day with clean drinking water in their homes. Think about that. So if we want to talk about speeding things up for water, let's speed up clean drinking water. Let's end the boil water advisories. I know members opposite will say that's a federal government responsibility, and yes, the federal government has to act on this. But when it comes to in Ontario, why don't we just do it and then send the bill to the federal government to pay for it so we can proudly say we've ended boil water advisories in this province?
Thank you.